Hello, my name is Ethan Cosmo. I'm a junior at USF. My major is secondary social science education, and I want to become a history teacher. Some of my hobbies is playing video games and playing basketball. Now that I got the introductions out of the way, let's move on to the articles and video, and I'll share my thoughts and opinions about them. The first article we're going to talk about is the one by Kathy Snow, and this article is pretty much focusing on the idea that we should not be using certain terminology of vocab when talking about or describing people with disabilities, and this article provides examples of what you should say instead. For example, what you shouldn't say is a person has a mental health illness. Rather, you should say this person has a mental health condition. The reason why you should use these type of vocab, the article explains that using terms such as mental health illness can bring a negative connotation to people when describing about them, and just kind of just attaches a label to these people with disabilities when you're constantly reminding them of that they're not the same with people without disabilities, and you're going really in depth of what they're really disabled with. So this article wants to kind of normalize the idea that people do have disabilities in our society, and anything by using certain terminology or just saying a person is just simply disabled can kind of get rid of that negative stigma or negative connotation when you use other terminology such as this person has a mental health illness, or saying a person is wheelchair bounded instead of just saying this person uses a wheelchair. So, and they think that doing these type of things can overall just get rid of that negative stigma and connotation when you talk about people with disabilities, and just kind of make them more associated with everyone else in society, and so they don't feel like a social outcast, they don't feel too distant from us who do not have social disabilities. Now, moving on to the next article, we have the one from the American Psychological Association. This one's pretty similar to the kind of concepts they're talking about, but they kind of go show some more insight. For example, they believe that disabilities can be used as a form of diversity. They kind of compare it to things such as a person's social class, religion, ethnicity, and whatnot, which kind of makes sense because if we're trying to make people with disabilities a normal concept and not like some grandiose thing, seeing it as like the same level as a person's ethnicity or religion is kind of a good way to think about it. And this article also talks about the concepts of identity first language and person's first language. Calling back to the previous article, identity first language would be saying this person has a mental health condition, and a person's language would be saying a person has a mental health illness. And an examples provided in this article, such as identity first language, is referring to a person as a blind person, while person first language is saying this person who is blind or with blindness. So, as mentioned previously, identity first is trying to get rid of the kind of normalize that this person has a disability, and you just simply kind of make it short, sweet, and simple, while you don't use person first language, while kind of generates that pity or that negative connotation, or like pretty much attaching a label to someone that they're constantly reminded that they're very different from people without disabilities, which can make them feel distant from others and from society in general. Now, the third article I'm going to talk about is the one from the National Disability Rights Network, and it's kind of the same thing from the previous two, where it wants to promote that identity first language and not that person first language. And they give an example such as, instead of saying Jenny, an 18-year-old soccer player who has a prosthetic limb, you can just simply say Jenny, who is disabled. Like previously mentioned, just kind of like shortening it and just saying this person disabled kind of eliminates any type of pity or negative connotation, or like, oh, this person has this like there's like a disease almost, which, disability isn't a disease, it's part of people now, and like the articles are trying to do it, trying to normalize it so people don't really see disabilities in a different light when compared to everyone else. This article also goes in depth of what you should really avoid in general when you talk about people with disabilities. For example, you should not use these type of euphemisms such as don't say physically challenged or handicapped, or saying the R word, or saying they're crippled. You can just simply just say disabled, and because disability is like the natural part of the human experience. Everyone's going to have some type of disability, so why make it try to generate the self pity or give these negative connotations by using these words like saying crippled. Rather, you can just shorten it and just saying you're disabled. Another thing that was mentioned in these articles that if you're really unsure on how to describe a person's disability, just simply ask the person. Like that's kind of just most things in life. If you don't know what a person wants, you can just simply ask them. And if they want to use certain terminology when being described about disabilities, that's all them. They're the ones that provide you the answer, and you can say about them. So this way, you can just simply ask the person about it. Now, the fourth piece of material we're going to talk about is the TED Talk. And I found this one is the most interesting one since we got to see like a live speech about a person with a disability explaining this whole concept in general and giving comparisons. So, in summary, this person wants disabilities, people with disabilities like the norm, kind of like what the articles mentioned, but also she doesn't want the and standards be different for people with disabilities. For example, she brings up a story where when she was younger, her community wanted to give her a community award, but she was kind of confused because she didn't really do anything. And she realized that people shouldn't really be setting the standards lower or expectations lower for people with disabilities just because they're disabled, because it kind of just feels like a participation trophy and not really celebrating what they really accomplished or what they achieved. So this person explained that I don't want to be rewarded for simply doing nothing and watching TV, but I would rather feel rewarded, and other people should be with disabilities should be rewarded about things they accomplish. She thinks that concepts or like ideological things should be rewarded. For example, she brings up examples where she thinks that people who find ways or in very innovative ways to get around their life should be what be awarded. For example, she talked about how barbecue thongs could be used as a good picker. How she can use her uh, electric chair as another source of battery for her phone. Obviously, those are more like jokes, but the whole concept is we shouldn't be they people with disabilities shouldn't just be awarded just for simply existing. Rather, they should be rewarded for innovative things they think of or do to get around their lives and what they're able to accomplish. And which I kind of agree with. All these sources are pretty much talking about how we shouldn't put the standards of person with disabilities on the same level lower than the same lower level with the people without disabilities. You should keep the expectations and standards the same with both people, because now you're not really differentiating people with disabilities, and you're kind of closing the gap of making people with disabilities feel normal and natural around people without disabilities. And so by getting rid of a lower standard or giving out these participation trophies and getting rid of people with disabilities feeling losing self-esteem about this or having negative connotations when they're reminded they have disabilities. So yeah, those are my thoughts about these sources. So please comment. I would love to like talk about these in more in depth with you guys. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day.